If you had to tell one story that summed up who you were as a person, you know, who you are for sure as a person, tell that story.
When I wake up every morning, I try and be more efficient than I was yesterday, and I try and be less of a piece of shit than I was yesterday. So if I can get answers to those two questions, I come out a better person at the end of it.
You can't put people in buckets, right? We all are a culmination of our experiences in our past and stuff like that, but we all have a brain, which kind of makes it hard for us to put anyone in a bucket because everyone is vastly different.
Welcome to No Universal Answers to the Universe, a video podcast and interview series about overcoming adversity and growing from it. Your hosts are Taylor Hall and Kenneth Gibbons. Tonight we are joined by Katie Lemons here to give us some insight into his life. Katie, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Like you said, I'm KD, born and raised in South Georgia, recently moved up to the Atlanta area. I work by day as a 7th grade middle school math teacher. By night, I am a video game enthusiast. A lot of times I like to stream, and if I'm not streaming, if I'm not working on educating kids, then I'm either watching or playing basketball.
So if you're streaming, you're schooling people by day and schooling people by night playing games.
Hey, that's the plan, man. That's what I try to do.
So when you're streaming, are you streaming through Twitch?
Oh yeah, I stream through Twitch. It's kind of a group of us, about 3 or 4. We stream collectively in this group called Plug-in Players.
Plug-in Players. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, you guys have your own page and everything like that. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, we're pretty upstart.
I feel you. What games you guys play?
I focus mostly on sports games, so you'll see a lot of 2K, little MLB, little Madden. I actually got into Spider-Man recently.
Okay.
We got a guy on there who's really big into Rocket League.
There you go.
Another one, he likes a lot of GTA. And there's a bunch of random odd games that you probably don't see anybody else stream, honestly.
That's what's up. Did you see that 16-year-old kid win $3 million the other day?
Bro, I looked at it. Like, the second my kid comes out the womb, we can go straight on the computer. We about
Well, that's funny. I'm going to segue into this because I've been wanting to talk to somebody about it. So this is kind of perfect. What do you feel like? Do you think it's positive? Obviously, you said as soon as your kid comes out, you're going to put them on games. Do you think that a lot of the injury discussions and concussion protocols and stuff like that's been coming up over the last couple of years, do you think that's helped the push towards like non-contact things, like obviously gaming and stuff like that? Do you think that's played a role in it?
Yeah, it definitely hasn't hurt it. The more that's come up, parents are concerned about their kids playing contact sports, specifically football. And I mean, if you look at it from a parent's point of view, a lot of parents put their kids into sports so they can, learn skills, make new friends. But a lot of parents say, if I can put my son in front of a computer and him not get a concussion and he can still make new friends, I think they're okay with that too.
Okay. And obviously I feel like from what you just said, you're okay with it as well. Do you think it's hindered us in this day and age from having people's skills in person, and a lot of times having people who are now very high anxiety when they have to present in front of a group of people and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will say, as long as I'm talking to somebody, it's going to be the same. But it's a difference between talking to someone on the West Coast and you're on the East Coast, through a microphone, and meeting them face to face. So I mean, it's definitely hurt people's face-to-face interactions. I feel like now more than ever, there are people who specialize, and I actually have a friend who does that, in helping people with public speaking and job interviews and just being around people, like a bunch of people on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure as a teacher teaching 7th grade math, you probably don't have a whole lot of presentations, but I'm sure you hear students talking about them and stuff like that. Do you feel like from the time that you were in school until now, there's been a vast change in that?
Yes. In my classroom, I usually like kids to work in groups because I feel like they learn better that way. And, back when I was in middle school, teachers said work in groups. We're working in groups no matter what.
Right.
Kids these days, you tell them to work in groups. Well, I don't like people. I don't know who that is. You can use your mouth. Ask that person what their name is,
Right.
and
I,
it's crazy these days, man.
oh yeah.
Is there a point that comes where you have to tell these kids they're too young to be that cynical, or is it just the way that they're coming up now?
Uh, a little bit of the first. I always have this saying in my classroom when I get some kind of pushback from my students. I always say, "I'm not asking you, I'm telling you." So if I say, "Okay, we're working in groups," they say, "No, we don't want to work in groups." I was like, "Okay, that wasn't a question. That's me telling you this," because to me, it's more than just learning math facts. It's about having genuine face-to-face human interaction, and they need that, especially these days.
Yeah. So all right, I'll take a step back. Do you think I'll take another step back actually for the listeners? KD worked with us at camp, the camp that we worked at. Do you feel like camps like that are more important now, like than they ever were before?
Yes, working at first and foremost was one of the best things I've ever done. But in these days, there's not a lot of face-to-face interaction, and it's the tech age. There's a lot of people just on their phones 24/7. So to be in a space where you're technology free,
Hmm.
you can learn life skills, you can learn how to interact with people without a screen. I think is a very important thing, and I think some of the most successful people know how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you. I think working there was one of the best things that I've ever done. And I would go as far to say that it was important for us, even though we got back on our phones and got back on our laptops at night, being away from technology for 14 or 16 hours in a day. Oh man, I miss it. I wish
Right.
people weren't calling me and sending me emails. So I'm going to ask you now, Taylor, do you think you would stand to learn or grow if you had to disconnect from technology for 16 hours a day for 3 months?
Oh, 100%. If I could chuck my phone in a river and never look back, I absolutely would. I got off of social media about 5 years ago. I have a LinkedIn profile, and that's about it. And I have never been happier.
There you go. There you go. So I'll take a couple steps back with KD. You had mentioned that in your free time you like to play basketball and watch basketball and stuff like that. And a lot of the video games that you play are sports oriented. What first of all, how do you feel about the NBA offseason?
This was by far the best NBA offseason I've ever seen, man. There were so many things that happened. I think the thing that shook me the most, it had to be the Paul George trade. I went to sleep and I saw on social media people's like Kawhi's never going to make a decision. And I woke up and it said Kawhi's with the Clippers. I was like, okay, cool. I thought it could happen. Then it said Paul George is also with the Clippers. I'm just, all right, we got to leave. I'm not here no more.
I thought the biggest one was like I thought Russell Westbrook was never going to leave OKC,
Bro,
and then it's like
right.
Paul George left, and he was like, "All right, screw you guys, I'm tired of people leaving," and then he went to the Rockets. Like I think that Russell Westbrook and James Harden have grown so much since they were on the Thunder together. I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to win a championship.
Mm-mm.
Specifically because of the coach. I don't think their style of play is a championship style of play.
No, it never has been. It never has been. So growing up, and I'll ask you now too. So growing up and currently, who are your favorite basketball players?
Uh, Growing up, the first basketball player who ever caught my eye, who I liked, and who is actually my favorite basketball player of all time now, is Shaquille O'Neal. Most
Okay.
definitely. I
Okay.
remember I used to grow up thinking, man, if I'm 6'1" one day, I'm going to be just like Shaq. Some of my current favorites. Uh, People are 50 feeling this. I'm a LeBron fan. I feel like he can do so many different things on the court.
Yeah.
I feel like skill wise, with like I don't think anyone can does all the things he does together better than him right now. I like Chris Paul. I call Chris Paul the last true point guard. I think Chris Paul, even though I think he's only 6 foot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's still taller than me, but NBA.
Right.
He's getting slower, but I still think that he's probably one of the smartest players on the floor every single night he goes out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I like this player for a while, and then I hated him, and then I'm just like, okay, he's cool now because he's actually really good, and I can't hate him anymore. Kevin Durant.
The man who shares the same initials, man. Look at that.
Right. I remember I was actually at camp at Fallen Creek. It was July 4th when someone came up to me and told me that Kevin Durant was leaving the Thunder. And I didn't believe it at first. And I was 17 types of hurt, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'll say this because it's a big thing nowadays. You see the NFL cracking down on it more than the NBA, but pretty much all sports are starting to crack down on it because pretty much anything that a player does wrong, whether he's convicted of it in the court of law or not, he gets punished for it because they say that these guys are role models for kids and kids look up to them and they try and imitate them. Would you say that these basketball players that you looked up to growing up, that you tried to imitate them from a personal level, or was it all just sports related?
Definitely with these 4 guys specifically, definitely from a personal level as well. Shaquille O'Neal was I actually read his autobiography. He looked up to Kareem when he was growing up, but Kareem lost all his money in some kind of fake soybean stock. And so Shaq's one of Shaq's goals while he was in the NBA was making sure that when he left, he wasn't broke. And like if I follow him on Instagram and everything, he has so many different. He has his fingers in so many different ventures right now. I think he owns a couple of Five Guys, a couple of car washes, some nightclubs, and so he used his platform to do other things that he was going to enjoy. And the same thing with LeBron. He has the I Promise school.
I Promise, yeah.
He being a teacher, I'm a big fan of that. LeBron has also been really good with not having any type of marital scandals. He married his high school sweetheart. Excuse me. He's never, we've never seen him in the news for, cheating or stepping out or anything like that.
Right.
And so I think guys like that, they understand that even though you don't ask to be a role model, when you sign, a major sports contract, you automatically have kids and adults watching you. So you become a role model. It's kind of like a side effect of the job.
Right. I see. I look at it differently, and I'm going to ask Taylor a different question here in a second. But like me growing up, like my favorite athletes were like Allen Iverson by far, and then you had Randy Moss, and like those were my guys, right? And I would say that outside of the sport, neither one of them was role models. So like for me growing up, like I took it and I completely separated it in my mind. I was like, man, I want to be like these guys when I step on the court or when I step on the field. And then when I step off the field, I was in this weird situation where I was like, I want to be like, Steve Jobs. Like, like you look up to like super professional people who are in the spotlight, or Bill Gates or whoever it is, who are like, achieving things in a different way. And I tried to separate that because, everyone has their flaws and everyone has their strengths, and you want to try and imitate everyone's strengths. So I looked at it differently. Now, Taylor, I know that you, or at least from my understanding, you weren't very big on sports growing up. Where did you find like role models?
So for me, it comes more from the musical venues and particular artists, but the parallels are definitely still there. And Katie, to play off of your thing, from a musical standpoint, I would use the phrase separate the art from the artist. I can appreciate someone's work greatly and realize that they could possibly be a very terrible person not from behind the mic or not on the court. How do you kind of look at that when you're looking at these guys? Do you personally separate the art from artist, or do you really try and only find people to look up to and to promote that are both good people and good athletes?
A mix of both. The players I like most are the people who I don't have to separate the art from the artist. But there are some players who I can say, okay, he's a really, really, really good basketball player, and I really like what he does on the court. But I'm not going to look up to him outside of basketball.
And to follow up to that, since you are an educator, would you be able to promote an athlete to the next generation without being both?
If I'm a high school coach and I have a college recruiter come to me asking about a player, really have to give both sides. They can be a great basketball player, and that's what everyone loves. But if this player, if he doesn't have grades, if he can't stay out of trouble, then I can't vouch for him, because let's say I know this player is in a lot of trouble. He stays in and out of trouble. Let's say I vouch for him. I say, hey coach, he'll be great. Recruit him. Offer him a scholarship. The kid gets a scholarship. He goes to the college, but then while he's at college, he gets in some trouble. He ends up getting kicked off the team. Now my credibility is shot, so I can't risk my credibility by lying for a player.
So it is a credibility thing. I was wondering, is it for the student's benefit? Is it for the sport's benefit? Is it the reputation? How do you make that decision whether or not you put your stamp on somebody?
It does require all three for me to put my stamp on somebody, because you have to be a complete person to me. I don't think it's just enough that you are good at the sport. You have to back it up with your actions.
So quick question here. I know you've coached. You were on the basketball staff with me at camp, and I've coached outside of that since then, and I've also coached before that. Baseball, basketball, football. I grew up and I was on the poor side of town and didn't necessarily have a whole lot, and so I have a soft spot for kids who come from that background. And I shouldn't. I try not to play favorites, but it tugs at your heartstrings. And those kids are typically, your troubled youth are typically the ones that are going to have problems, right? Yeah, they'll be good athletes, but they either don't have grades or they act up in class, or they, sometimes both. And you try and get through those kids. Do you ever feel like lining them up with a coach and explaining that, but explaining it in a way to where they can move on from what's keeping them or holding them back so that they can grow as a human being?
Oh yeah, for sure. At the middle school I teach, I'm also the head boys basketball coach. And I've run into some kids like that where, talent out of this world, don't come from the best type of background. And the best you can do for them, and I say this in my classroom, I think it's kind of my philosophy. I want to prepare you for the next level, whether that's in the classroom, getting you from 7th grade math to 8th grade math, or there's, on the basketball court, getting you to a higher skill level. You got to get them ready. And that comes with their maturity. If I have a kid who has, background problems, the first thing I'll probably say to them, you can't let, your past define you. You can't let your background define who you are, And I show them, different players who came from that kind of type of background who got successful. So I'm saying, you don't have to be this type of way. And definitely I will line it up for a high school coach, because we can't give up on these kids.
Right.
It's really easy to, but you can't do it, because in the end, it falls on you as much as it does on them.
Yeah.
To dive into that a little bit, let me get both of your guys' takes on what's the difference between an underdog worth investing in and a disenfranchised child that is kind of a troublemaker at heart.
I think they're one and the same. So I think what separates them is obviously success. So we root for the underdog because somewhere along the line, the underdog has won, right? The complete disenfranchised youth doesn't ever win, because if they won, they would become the underdog, right? So I think the separation is obviously success, but I think that comes from personal drive. I think 100% comes from personal drive. I mean, people don't get where they're at by themselves, obviously, but you're not going to get anywhere that you don't want to get to. You know, if I don't want to succeed, it doesn't matter how much help I have or how little I have, I'm not going to. If I have all the drive in the world and I, you know, pick a point in time that, or a place in time where I want to be, and I bust my ass to get there, you know, it might take some help, but eventually, you know, people make it, right? And they might not make it all the way up here, but they'll make it somewhere in here and be successful to a certain extent. But I feel like what separates them is success. And I think to get that success, you have to have some sort of drive, right? You hear about the troubled youth who, you know, doesn't make good grades and, you know, is a trouble in the classroom, who spends 6 hours in the gym a day. Okay. You root for that kid because that kid obviously has a good work ethic. He just doesn't know how to apply it in other areas. And then that's where people like KD can come in, or people like us when we were at camp can come in and try and focus that across the board. Whereas if you have a kid who's like, naturally I can dunk a basketball, but I don't go to class and, you know, I don't make good grades and I have trouble, but I'm not in the gym. I'm hanging out with my buddies in a Walmart parking lot all the time. Like, it's hard to help that kid because he's also surrounding himself with probably other kids who are doing the exact same thing.
Well, first off, I feel personally attacked. I've spent many hours in a Walmart parking lot.
So have I. That's why I'm saying it. Like, so have I. 110%. I've been there. I've done it. I know. And you have to get yourself out of that.
So, Katie, can I get your opinion on that, as well as, since you see both the academic and the athletic side of things, how do you identify that spark in the kids that you really put the extra time into?
I really can't. I don't think it takes one thing to identify that spark. It takes you know, knowing the kid, having a good rapport with the kid, and usually they'll end up telling you. So, I mean, for instance, I have there was 2 different kids I had. There was one kid last year I coached. He had a bunch of talent, and to me, I guess he would fall under what you would call, you know, the disenfranchised kid, where he had a lot of bad breaks, but the bad breaks he had it was his decision, you know, for the bad breaks. He was the kid who, you know, decided to, you know, I'm going to skip class. I'm not going to do my homework. I'm not going to show up for practice. And I mean, I tried so hard with him. You know, I talked to him multiple times, and it ended up going above my head to the principal, where the principal cut him from my team. Thankfully, he was only in 7th grade, so I'm going to see him this year. We'll give him another shot. I had another kid who I guess I would consider the underdog, because he had a lot of bad breaks in life too. But the bad breaks he had weren't necessarily his decision. You know, they weren't consequences of his actions. You know, he didn't have a great home life. You know, didn't have a lot of support at home. But this is the kid, you know, still the underdog, who says, you know, all this is happening to me, but I'm still going to show up to class. I'm still going to try hard. I'm not going to miss any practices and whatnot. And that kid, you know, he gave his all, and, you know, I had to have a bunch of talks with him too, but he kind of figured it out. And so the spark you have to see with these kids, and my mom used to tell me this a lot, I can only help you if you're willing to help yourself. If you can't have a kid who's like, okay, I see what I'm doing wrong, I'm going to work hard to fix that, then at that point, unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do for that kid.
So real quick, before I think Taylor has another point, but real quick. So my mom used to say that, and the other one she used to say all the time. You know, we had this like little cork board that she would put quotes on, and the one that stayed there like incessantly was "hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard."
I know
and
that well.
Good God, it's a great quote, and I think it just speaks wonders.
So when you say that a kid will tell you essentially if they're worth investing in, is it actions or words? Since we get better at communicating our thoughts the older we get, at that age, how does a child really put themselves out there? Is it just showing up every day, or how do they really present themselves when you know they're worth investing in?
It's definitely actions over words. I think actions always speak louder than words. And it really it starts with the little things. You can, I feel like you can tell a lot by body language. If I have a kid who shows up to class and he might be having the worst day ever. If he sits upright and he looks attentive, then I know that he's at least trying. If I have a kid coming in, has his materials, doesn't want to get them out, is slouching, dozing off, then I can tell that no matter what he does, his actions are, I don't want to be here. So you always have to watch the kids' actions, day in, day out.
So, quick question, because I was that kid, KD. I was the one that came in slouching, sitting in the back of the classroom. I slept.
I got a couple of them.
For I think I bragged about it, ended up getting written up for it, but for like a straight semester, like a full 9 weeks in high school in one class, I slept every single day. And so like I had those troubles. What kind of students were you guys?
So I have a unique perspective on this. I was homeschooled K through 12, so slouching did not work, as my mom was and my dad was the principal. You get your ass beat doing shit like that. So I unfortunately don't have too much to add to that. I've definitely been academically driven. I have never performed well in any sort of sport, and would not say I started working well with others till about 20 years old.
I think I was kind of what you said your mom was. I was talented, but I definitely was not a hard worker.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I've always been pretty good in math. I got a math degree from the greatest university on earth, Hell Southern. So I've always been good in math and science specifically. So when it came to things like that in grade school, I didn't really have to study a lot. I could kind of get it the first time the teacher taught it to us. So I'm like, okay, I'm good. I feel like I was above average, but I wasn't great in social studies or reading or lit or anything like that. So I was lazy with it. I didn't work hard to, I passed,
Right.
But I feel like if I had worked hard, I would have passed with better grades. So.
Yes. So you said you didn't try in those other classes. Were you trying harder in the math and sciences, or did they just come naturally and you still didn't apply more effort? You just made better grades because you knew the material better?
Yeah, I made better grades because it just came more naturally. I didn't study harder in math or science classes. I just knew it better.
Yeah. Did you, if you don't mind me asking, what was your GPA in high school?
So my high school did this thing where they weighted all our GPA. So any honors or AP classes I took, they gave them an extra point. So on paper, my high school GPA was a 3.6. But if you take away the weights and look at the raw, I think I had like a 2.9.
Okay. What about you, Taylor? I'm assuming homeschool you still get a GPA, right?
Yeah, and from like 10th grade onwards, all online classes, I was weighted 4.66, unweighted 3.95.
Goodness gracious!
Whoa! So dang. Okay. Okay. So I was like a 3.7. I was top 10 in my class, but I mean, obviously Taylor just mopped the floor with us, man. Good Lord.
Well, that's the problem, is when there's only a graduating class of one, you're valedictorian by default.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have been pretty damn close in my high school. So, I mean, I was 3.7 and I was 9th. So,
But I have a question that just popped up from this whole thing. Katie, if a student came to you, I realize it's a little young for the demographic that you teach, but if a student in your class came to you with the phrase C's get degrees, what's your response to that?
I would tell him, I mean, I have to be honest, C's do get degrees. He's right. But C's don't necessarily get you a job or get you the job that you want or get you the job that you want in the future. So if you're okay with C's, then, go out there and get a C. But just know that the guy, your boss or, your boss's boss is probably the one that tried a little bit harder and got a couple B's in the process.
And it's so funny because you hear people like Elon Musk and people – that are managing these multi-million, billion-dollar corporations who like flunked out of college and who like made C's and stuff like that. And it's funny. I was listening to a TED Talk, and I really wish I remember the guy's name, because that would be something we could drop a link to or something like that. But he was one of these guys, right? He's managing like a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and he was talking about how, he made C's through college, but it's because he knew that he would still get the piece of paper at the end with those C's, and he could take that time and get a better return on his investment if he utilized that time somewhere else. So he utilized that time in creating his company. So I think the other thing that people have got to realize is of course, in some people's eyes, perception is reality. So they see these multi-billion-dollar people out here making C's, but they're only getting half the story. The full story is, yeah, they're getting C's, but it's not like they're sitting off there partying the rest of the time. They were getting C's over here, and then they were utilizing the rest of their time to start SpaceX or fucking Amazon or something like that, Yeah. So
degrees, but hard work is going to make you successful.
Yep.
Follow up to that for both of you guys. Hindsight being 2020, if you could have added one extracurricular for the 4 years of college, what would it have been that kind of rounded out you as a professional?
Man, honestly, I would pick some type of finance or accounting class, because I've always had like kind of a goal to be the people who do taxes during tax season.
An accountant?
Yeah, like just accounting, but just doing people's taxes. Because taxes they're crazy. I talked to one of my friends the other day about this. You feel like, you're in high school, it's like, I don't really understand taxes. And you think, okay, one day I'm going to automatically turn 23 years old. I know taxes. That shit don't work like that, man.
No. No, I'm still trying to figure out how Uncle Sam has the right to take so much money away from you.
So much.
So to answer your question, Taylor, and I know it's probably gonna sound really, cocky, conceited, whatever you want to call it. I think I took that opportunity. So in college, I think the reason I did so well at Georgia Southern was because I did everything that I didn't do in high school. So as far as applying myself to get grades, I think I did the exact same in high school that I did in college. And I was very successful in college because I did take that extra time. And although I did party and drink and live it up, I mean, I'm sure Katie remembers playing True American. So we had a good time, but I started off in ASC my sophomore year, which is the American Society for Civil Engineers, and became project manager the next year, and then became president the year after that. And there's 5 trophies sitting in the trophy cases at Georgia Southern because, we brought home trophies for the first time in 20 years from one of those competitions. And we're the first, we only had 1 trophy and we got it in 81. And then in 2 years, we brought home 5 trophies. And, I felt like I took advantage of that. I also started the National Engineering Honor Society and started the National Transportation Engineering Honor Society. And I really dove deep into extracurriculars in college. So I would say that I think I did myself justice.
That's good. I feel like, organizations and clubs in college are a big thing for a lot of people. I think my freshman year, spring semester, I joined the music fraternity, Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia. And it really teaches you the things that it teaches you job skills that you need but don't know you need. I learned how to dress professionally. I learned how to send out professional emails. I learned how to conduct business meetings. Those are things that, you don't really get taught in any type of college class.
Would you like to answer that same question you had?
Yeah, I would definitely have added Toastmasters in because being homeschooled, I never got the opportunity to really push myself at a younger age to do public speaking. And now that I'm thrust into the corporate world, it's expected of you whether or not you're ready. And I definitely have had to do some emergency preparation on my own personal time that I wish I would have done during the time academically that was set aside for me to be learning things like that.
So, Katie, you had mentioned something. So you taught 10th and 11th grade. Can I ask you on a personal level why you switched to middle school?
It's actually a super duper fun. It's kind of a funny story. So I worked at, and I'm gonna name drop them because I can. I worked at 2017, 2018 school year. I thought I did a pretty good job. I enjoyed it. I was one of the assistant coaches on the basketball team. county was doing, I think, budget cuts, and they were reassigning people to different schools. And so usually what happens if the teachers will get reassigned are usually the newest teachers, the teachers who were hired most recently. I was one of the most recent hires, and so they brought me into the office to say, they're moving me to I think it was called middle school. At that point, I didn't want to teach middle school, and I didn't want to leave my school, but also middle school was actually the same place where a girl who I was with or talking to, we had just had kind of a big break. So I'm like, I'm not about to go and teach with her.
Right.
I finessed my way out of my contract. I started looking all over Metro Atlanta. I was still actually looking at high schools because I didn't know I wanted to teach middle school yet. Middle school called me up, brought me in for an interview. And the way they sold their school to me, and their idea of being one community and a family, it had me hooked. And I got there. I taught 6th grade, and I fell in love with teaching 6th grade. And I told myself, this middle school place is where I belong. I feel like high school kids have problems, and middle school kids have problems, but they have different type of problems. And I think the middle school problems that middle schoolers have, I'm more accustomed to deal with.
Something I ran into with the older kids when we were at camp was the lack of respect due to the smaller age gap between the counselors and the campers. Did you run into that when you were teaching the upper grades, of where being fresh out of college or even a year or two after, they would look at you more of a peer than a mentor?
Yeah, I actually run into that all the time, which is one of the reasons I said I don't think I'm ever going back to teaching high school. Especially because I get a lot of people tell me I look young. I remember when I was there at the high school open house, I was talking to an older woman, one of the kids' parents. It was just me and her in the room. And another couple came in, 2 parents came in, mom and dad. They were waiting for us to finish our conversation. And when our conversation was over, the old lady left, and they looked shocked because they thought the old lady was the teacher, and I was on the transferred over to the kids. I think when I started teaching there, I was only 23, and I have 17-year-olds in my class. That's a 6-year gap. My brother and I are 6 years apart, and so they looked at me more a lot of times like a peer because I know some of the same stuff they do. We use some of the same slang terms, listen to some of the same music. So it was. I think I had a harder time commanding respect out of my kids than I did anything else that school year.
So we'll dive into a little bit about our past, because I brought that up earlier. How would you describe your childhood, KD?
Honestly, I think my childhood, it would go down as probably better than you would think your average, Black kid childhood to go. I had a pretty good. I started off. You would think I really noticed this till late, but I feel like my family kind of started off rough. So my mom had me as a single parent when she was 21 years old. We lived with my grandparents until I was, I think, 4 years old. And at that point, my mom's 25, which I'm 25 now, and I still don't see how she did it. She bought a house.
Wow.
She moved out of her parents' house. She bought her own house. So it was me and her. She met a guy. They had a kid. I had a brother. The guy was an ass. So you live and learn. Only thing I thank him for is for giving me a little brother. So now it's me and my mom and my little brother. And I think she always preached education, me getting a good education. So in 3rd grade, and I hope when they hear this, they don't be like, we got to go back and investigate. I don't think they will. She faked our address so I could go to school in a different school district. We've
all done that, man. We've all done that.
And so, she brought us there. 6th grade, we actually made the move official. We moved into the school district. Sixth, seventh, eighth grade was typical high school, no, middle school mess. 10th grade? No, in the eighth grade, my mom met another guy, preacher. He's not my stepdad. I love him to death, like my real, well, honestly, better than my real dad. And we, it's been great ever since. I feel like if my mom had it for me, if my mom had it, she had it for us. Anything that I needed, she made sure I didn't really want for anything.
Yeah.
You know? And I think, I'm so appreciative of her and my grandparents and my dad and all my whole support system. I feel like growing up, I had a really good support system, which made me, not want to quit. Who they made me get to where I am today. So I honestly had a better than the average childhood. I don't have one of those. What did CJ McCollum say? Get it from the mud. I don't have one of those get it from the mud type of stories.
Yeah.
I'm just really thankful and blessed that I had the type of upbringing.
If you guys are good, I'll share mine. So just a quick, brief overview, kind of like what KD went through. So my mom had me when she was 30, but she already had 3 kids that she had when she was 18. I actually had a half brother, so it wasn't actually hers, but she was caring for him. And then another one when she was like 21. So I was like the youngest by far. And so like my older siblings moved out by the time I was 8. But my dad, he was construction worker. He owned his own business. With my mom was very, very driven in that aspect. He was a high school dropout, but just very intelligent, drew his own blueprints up and stuff like that, built houses. So I grew up on job sites. It's kind of why I am who I am today as far as construction related stuff. So, but he was got very addicted to drugs, was a pretty hefty drug dealer, very, very, very abusive. And he finally left the picture when I was about 5 or 6. And so grew up, there was about 3 years there where my siblings were still at home and then they all left. So then it was just me and my mom for a while. And then I got one of those asshole stepdads. But before that, my mom dated, I don't know, a handful of guys in and out, whatever. And then got a stepdad who's alcoholic. He was an asshole. I'm pretty confident that he did drugs too. He just was a little bit better at hiding it. So it got to the point where like one of my sisters had moved back home, but she was heavily using drugs. And like I had to put a deadbolt on my bedroom door to just keep people out of my room. And I actually got into a physical altercation with my stepdad a couple weeks before my 16th birthday. And I told my mom that it was like either him or me. And when I came home the next day from summer basketball workouts, he was there. So I grabbed my stuff and I moved out. And so it's a little bit different, but I would absolutely say that in the same sense that you mentioned it, the whole time, if my mom had it, I had it. She gave me everything she could. And when I share that story, people, I don't know, it kind of sheds a bad light on her from the standpoint of like her choosing her husband over me. But like in the time frame, like I didn't take it that way necessarily. She had given me everything. So like, I don't know. I didn't take it that way, but I was able to live with my buddy, the guy who ended up being my best man at my wedding. And before I went off to college. And I would say that like the support I have from my oldest sister, who was like, she lives like right down the road from me now in Columbia. And like, we see each other all the time and hang out all the time. We're really close. Her and my mom, they was always supporting me and always telling me that, I could do whatever I needed to do to get where I wanted to go. So I would say that from a support system, I think I had that. And I think that was really great.
Now, to segue back into the educator and mentor role that you have, KD, with your students, how do you best impart that you have to obviously have a certain amount of a firm hand to make sure that they stay on task, but how do you impart to them that they really can do anything at that age and their potential is completely untapped?
It's a mix between tough love and repetition. I remember when I was, I was that age. My mom used to tell me all these little bits and pieces of advice. She used to keep telling me and keep telling me, like, okay, mom, whatever, I don't need that. And it wasn't until I got to, 21, 22, 23, to what she said started making sense to me. So the most you can do with these kids is just keep telling them, keep telling them, keep telling them, keep telling them. And one day, I feel like if enough people tell them, they'll realize it. And you can't just do it with your words, you have to do it with your actions. Because I said earlier, actions do speak louder than words. You can't just tell the kids you believe in them and, tell them that they can do as much as they want, whenever they want. But you have to show them that. You have to, and I feel like some of the things that I do in my classroom are geared toward that, are geared toward the student showing me what they can do. Okay, hey, let's have a project and let's not use a bunch of rules. Let's give them almost free range on it so they can see what they can do instead of just sticking them in this box and saying, this is all that you are allowed to do.
How do you do that with math? Since math is always one of those things, in my opinion, that's like finite. Like 2 + 2 is always going to equal 4. Like you're not going to be able to change that. Where like you could read a book 3 times and come to 3 different conclusions. So like, how do you keep math outside the box?
We call it, well, in the reading they call it reading across the curriculum. We do the same thing. I call it math across the curriculum. So it's basically kind of incorporating other subjects into math. Or just like life skills into math. Like I had this one project a while ago where I basically wrote it out saying, all right, you're 18 years old, you just graduated high school, and you're given $1 million, point blank period. You have $1 million. What do you do with that million? So kind of let their creative juices flow, kind of let them show me, where their minds are, how creative they can be with it. I did one where they had to create a Monopoly game, and the one I want to do, I haven't done yet, is having them kind of get in groups and like teaching a math lesson or teaching like a part of math through a form of art, where they want to paint it out, where they want to act it out, where they want to sing it, rap it, do a poem, write a short story, so they can see that they're more than what they think they are,
That's awesome. That is awesome. Would you say that like, I don't know, would you say that you if you were at that age, that if you had been told that you were going to be a teacher now, like how would you have felt then?
Honestly, I wouldn't be too surprised. I felt like I was always going to be a teacher. My family actually has a lot of teachers. My cousin's a teacher. My mom's a teacher. My stepdad is a teacher and a preacher, so he teach people in both types of ways. My grandmother was a parapro. My granddad was a preacher. So we've always had kind of in our family a knack for helping people, and I think it's great. A lot of people kind of look down on teaching, saying, a lot of people say, we don't need all of this and this and this, and teachers are underpaid, which we kind of are underpaid. But I make enough. I'm not going to complain about being paid. But honestly, if someone told me I was going to be a teacher when I was 11, 12, 13 years old, I'd be excited. I probably would have thought, nah, I'm going to be in the NBA. But still, at the same time, it's good to see someone. It's good to have someone who can look at you and say, you're going to be something, going to be somebody in life, especially at that age.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. We don't have to make it a bandwagon, but I'll jump out there and I'll say that teachers are definitely underpaid. Tab was a teacher for 3.5 years. She's no longer a teacher. It didn't have anything to do with the salary or anything like that. But no, I would say that you guys are definitely underpaid. What you're doing is great. And I think what you just said hits it right on the head. People sometimes need somebody. Like, we talked about we obviously had two different childhoods, but it seems like we both had great support systems. And a lot of these kids don't have that support system. So having somebody, especially somebody like you, Katie, like I would imagine that if I had you as a teacher, you're probably a really cool teacher, right? You're not like, no offense to anybody, but I feel like I could relate more to you as a middle schooler than I could to like a 95-year-old lady,
Yeah, it's definitely true.
So I would say that like having somebody like you tell them that they can do it and they can be who they want to be, that could change their whole life, What was the question, Taylor, that you asked Ruben last week about how he felt about working with kids? And you had mentioned something about like planting a tree that you're never going to actually see grow.
Oh, yeah. So how does that, since you're working with middle school, they've still got a couple years of primary school left and college is uncertain at that point. How much of yourself do you invest in these kids at the 7th, 8th grade level? Does it change any approach from when you did 10th, 11th grade to when you're doing 7th and 8th of how much of yourself that you put into it? Or are you a teacher first and foremost and grade level doesn't really impact your approach to the classroom?
Being a newer teacher, I can probably say, I put in more to these kids than I did my 10th and 11th graders. And it's partially because they give more. They at this age, at 6th, 7th grade, you don't really have that type of apathy that someone in 10th or 11th or 12th grade has. You still want to do good and you still can do good. By 11th grade, a lot of these kids are their minds are kind of made up as to what they're going to be in life and what they want to do. And, you can try to convince them, but convincing a 7th grader that they can be anything they want, I believe would yield a higher success rate than convincing an 11th grader that they can be anything they want. So I definitely give more. I won't say it's just because of my grade level, but it's just because of my experience. I feel like each year I've given a little bit more of myself in the classroom. And I like what Kendall said, you're really planting a tree that you might never ever see grow. And I feel like, parents feel the same way. The most you can do is give them what they need. What they do with it, you can't really tell them what to do with it. You can't ever really know what they're going to do with it. But you wanna let them leave your classroom knowing that you've done all that you can for them.
So do you, because I know a lot of teachers do this, do you take it personally when you invest so much into a child and they fail?
Yes, it hurts. It hurts, and then it kind of makes you, rethink. It's like, is what I did, did I do everything I can do? Did I do the right thing? Did I teach them the right way? I think those are the initial reactions. But then I feel like at some point it's just about reassurance. You're not solely responsible for what happens to this kid. The kid still has their own brain. They still have, their own decisions. And you and I know this may sound kind of harsh. I don't want to make it seem harsh. But at that point, when you feel like you've done all you can do to that kid and that kid still fails, at that point, you got to charge it to the game.
Yeah.
No one has 100% success rate. You just want to do what you can.
I got you. So we talked about it earlier. You had mentioned a very, very interesting comment. You said that if you were a principal, this is what you would do. So is becoming a principal in your long-term goals? Like, what's your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan, your further down the road plan?
Yeah. So I'll start with the 5-year plan. In 5 years, what's that? 2024.
Mm-hmm.
In 5 years, I definitely want to be an assistant principal. A couple weeks ago, I was actually, I haven't told a lot of people this. I guess this is an announcement. I was accepted into Georgia College in their Master's of Education Leadership. So 1-year program there. So hopefully, if everything goes right by this time next year, I'll have my master's degree and my Tier 1 certification, which basically says that I have the qualifications needed to be an assistant principal.
Okay.
So in 5 years, I want to be an assistant principal. I wanna own my own house. I want to be married. Shout out to my girl Britt. Uh,
There you go.
yeah, in 10 years, I definitely want to be a principal. I have it going one of three ways: a principal, a superintendent, or a college professor. Something I feel like I'm going to be in education until I retire, probably even after I retire, till I die. So those are my three big aspirations. That if I land in any one of those three spots, I'll feel like I've met my goal.
Okay.
So possibly a little bit of an explosive question. What do the terms teacher versus professor mean to you as someone who is chasing higher education?
Teacher versus professor. I think teachers are more personal. I feel like when you think about teachers, you do think about, a grade school setting where a lot of times you're taught more than just the book. A lot of teachers, especially ones I met, they will help you in other ways than just teaching you. A professor, I kind of related synonymous with professional. They come in, they teach you what's ever in the book, and they leave. They don't really care about your well-being. They don't care, why you're missing class. They come in there. If you're there, you're there. If you're not, you're not. If you're there on your phone, if you're there not taking notes, then they don't really care. They're just there and they do their job and they leave. A teacher is going to be more caring. If you're on your phone, they'll at least try their hardest to make you get off your phone, to make you take notes. They'll try to figure out why you're not at school and the like.
I say that to me, the difference is like I went back to middle school and high school and apologized to teachers for how bad of a student I was and for them keeping faith in me. I always made good grades. So they would always tell me, like, you're going to go somewhere. But, like, I probably made life miserable for them as a teacher. So I'd go back and apologize. And I would never go back to a professor and apologize because there was never that personal connection. Right.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, thinking back through it, I don't think there is a single professor in 5 years in 2 colleges that I would have any sort of qualms about my behavior in classroom.
Now, I will say this. There is a professor I had at Georgia Southern who, like, I hit up all the time. He was my academic advisor for ASE and got me involved in undergrad research and helped me get published. And, like, we stay in contact pretty regularly, and we talk about engineering trends and stuff like that. So, I mean, I would say that I have made those connections with at least one professor. I don't think I also think, like, we hopefully acted more like adults in college setting too than we did in high school and grade school.
Katie, to flip a question that we asked last week as well, since you've taught both middle and high school now, if you were able to impart something to both your middle school self and your high school self, what do you think, kind of looking at yourself in the mirror at such a different point in your life? If there was one thing you could tell your middle school self and one thing you could tell your high school self, what would you impart?
Man.
And I guess, would they be the same thing, or does the answer change between those years?
I think it would change. So, if I was talking to my high school self, I would probably tell him to just slow down. Nothing. I feel like at that point I was trying to do a lot of things. I was trying to move at 100 miles an hour. I was just telling him to slow down and enjoy the moment. If I was talking to my 13-year-old self, oh boy, stop. Honestly, stop stressing over girls. 100%. I feel like I stress too much over girls at that age when it really doesn't matter.
Not at all.
I tell my kids a lot of times, I was like 99% of the couples in middle school never get married.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I thought it was serious back then, man. I swear.
I think we all did. We all took a lot of stuff so serious, man. Oh, man.
Kenneth, since we made it a roundtable thing last time, same question: middle school self, high school self, and would it be the same information that you would impart?
Oh, middle school self. I'd probably tell him to get his act together. I'd probably, honestly, I'd tell him just to stop doing some of the things I was doing when I was in middle school, and I'd probably tell him to slow down as well. To Katie's point, in a different manner though. Like I don't know. I grew up pretty quick, and I felt like looking back on it, I in some areas I probably needed to, but there's a lot of areas where I grew up quickly and I did need to. So I would tell him to slow down there too and enjoy being a kid. Good God, I miss being a kid so much. High school, I'd probably tell high school self to be a better role model. Like I talk to my niece a lot, and we talk about, how she looked up to me and my nephew now looks up to me and stuff like that. And they see you in a whole different light. They see you as what they've built you up in their mind to be. And sometimes that's great, but sometimes it's almost not true. And I would tell high school me to be that role model. I always tell my niece and nephew, don't make the mistakes I made in high school. And I can turn around and tell them, hey, I did really well in college. Like, you can do those things. But it'd be so much nicer if I could be like, hey, I've been setting a good example for the last 10 years or 15 years, but I didn't at that point in time. So what about you, Taylor?
Probably both. Just the universal advice of the internet is a tool and not something to just spend free time on, because now free time is so much more of a valuable resource. And if I would have been able to use that extra free time to develop the hobbies and passions that I pursue now and don't have the time for now to really invest into, I feel like I could be much farther along as a person and much more three-dimensional as a person, as opposed to just kind of, I'm slowly whittling away at the couple of projects that I want to do. I feel like I could have really done something that wasn't just academic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Unless Taylor has anything else, I was going to tell you, KD, sum yourself up. This will be like the last little part of it. Sum yourself up in 3 words.
3 words. If I had to choose 3 words to sum myself up, passionate is definitely the first one. I feel like I'm passionate in everything I do. I don't do anything if I don't feel passionate about it. Second word, I want to hyphenate it, so it's one word: easygoing. I like going with the flow. I don't really go against the grain a lot. If something's happening, I can do it. And the last word, perseverance. Anything that I have to go up against, I got to get it done no matter what. A lot of times I tell myself, especially in college, when college seems like forever, I used to tell myself a lot, whether it was just getting my degree or in a certain class, it's like, so many other people have, done what I'm trying to do. They passed this class or they've gotten their degree. So there's no reason that I shouldn't be able to do that. So perseverance is definitely my last one.